My name is Rachel, and I'm 39 years old. 3 weeks ago, I received a phone call that shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was sitting in my home office reviewing quarterly reports when my cell phone rang with an unfamiliar number. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Margaret Holloway, a senior accounts manager at First Heritage Bank in Portland. She asked if I was Rachel Marie Donovan, and when I confirmed, her voice softened in that particular way people use when they're about to deliver difficult news. She told me she was calling about an account belonging to my sister, Natalie Grace Donovan. She said there was a significant estate matter that required my immediate attention. My heart stopped. My sister Natalie had died 4 months earlier in a car accident, and I had already grieved through the funeral, the memorial service, the painful process of accepting that my only sibling was gone at 34 years old. I had held our mother's hand while she wept. I had watched my father stare blankly at the casket. I had done everything a good daughter and sister was supposed to do, but Margaret Holloway wasn't calling about grief counseling or condolences. She was calling because Natalie had left behind $892,000 in a personal account, along with a safety deposit box, and both were addressed specifically to me. Not to our parents, not to be divided among the family. To me alone, with instructions that I was to be contacted exactly 4 months after her death. My hands started shaking so badly that I had to put down my coffee cup. Because here's what you need to understand. For my entire life, I had been told that Natalie was the struggling one, the one who needed help, the one who borrowed money constantly, who couldn't hold down a job, who was always one crisis away from homelessness. I had been sending my sister $3,000 every single month for the past 11 years. I had given her down payments, covered her rent, paid her car insurance. According to my parents, I was the successful one with the obligation to take care of poor, fragile Natalie. And now I was being told she died with nearly $1 million that nobody knew about. What I didn't know yet was that this phone call was going to unravel a decades-long deception that would destroy my relationship with my parents forever and finally show me who my family really was. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I have a feeling some of you are going to relate to this more than you'd like to admit. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town outside of Portland, Oregon, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and reputation was everything. My parents, Frank and Diane Donovan, were pillars of the community. My father owned a successful insurance agency, and my mother was the president of practically every volunteer organization in town. We lived in a beautiful colonial house with a wraparound porch and a perfectly manicured lawn. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. I was born first, and Natalie came along 2 years later. From the very beginning, the roles were established. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who got good grades and never caused trouble and always did what was expected. Natalie was different. She was dramatic, emotional, artistic. She cried easily and laughed loudly and demanded attention in ways I never did. My mother used to call her our little butterfly while I was her steady rock. Even as a child, I understood what that meant. Butterflies were beautiful and delicate and needed to be protected. Rocks were useful and sturdy and expected to just sit there being reliable. I don't remember exactly when the money thing started. It crept in so gradually that by the time I realized it had become a pattern, it felt too late to question it. The first real instance I can pinpoint was when I was 22 years old, fresh out of college with my first real job as a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm in Portland. I was making $38,000 a year and feeling like I had finally made it. I had a tiny studio apartment that I was so proud of, a used Honda Civic, and enough money to buy groceries without checking my bank account first. It felt like freedom. Natalie was 20 at the time, and according to my parents, she was going through a rough patch. She had dropped out of community college and was working part-time at a coffee shop while trying to figure out her life. My mother called me on a Sunday evening in March, and I remember it was raining so hard that the water was streaming down my window like a waterfall. She told me that Natalie's landlord was threatening to evict her because she was 2 months behind on rent. She said your father and I would help, but you know how tight things are with the economy? She said Natalie is just so fragile right now, and I'm worried about what this stress might do to her. And then she said, "You're doing so well, Rachel. You've always been so good with money. Could you help your sister out just this once? Just this once." Those 3 words would become the foundation of the next 11 years of my life. I sent Natalie $1,600 that month, enough to cover her back rent and get her through to her next paycheck. She texted me a string of heart emojis and the words, "Thank you, you're the best big sister ever." My mother called to tell me how proud she was of me for taking care of family. My father said nothing, which was normal, and I felt good. I felt like I was doing what a good sister was supposed to do. The second time came 4 months later. Natalie's car had broken down, and she needed repairs. My mother explained that it wasn't safe for a young woman to be without reliable transportation, and what if something happened to her? What if she broke down on the side of the road late at night? The guilt in my chest was so heavy I could barely breathe. I sent $800. The third time was 2 months after that. Natalie had a chance to take an art class that could really help her career, but she couldn't afford the supplies. My mother said this could be the thing that finally helps her find her path. And don't you want to support your sister's dreams? I sent $500. By the time I was 24, I was sending Natalie money every single month. Sometimes it was rent. Sometimes it was car trouble. Sometimes it was a medical bill or a credit card payment or an unexpected expense that just couldn't wait. My mother was always the messenger, always framing it as just this once or just until she gets back on her feet or you're the only one who can help her. And I always said yes, every single time. I told myself it didn't matter. I was making good money. I got promoted to senior accountant, then to accounting manager. I moved into a nicer apartment. I bought a new car. I started building a life. And if a chunk of my income went to helping my sister, well, that was just what family did. That was what I had been raised to believe. But there were moments that should have made me question things. Moments that I pushed aside because questioning them meant questioning everything. I remember being 27 and visiting my parents for Thanksgiving. I arrived a day early to help with the cooking, and Natalie was supposed to arrive on the morning of the holiday. When she finally showed up at 2 in the afternoon, 3 hours late, she was wearing a brand new leather jacket that looked like it cost more than my entire outfit. I complimented it because that's what you do, and she said casually, "Oh, I just treated myself." I've been working so hard lately. I remember standing in my parents' kitchen, stirring gravy, wearing the same black cardigan I'd had since college, thinking about the $800 I had sent her just 2 weeks earlier for an emergency vet bill for her cat. And I felt something twist in my stomach. But before I could examine it, my mother was at my elbow saying, "Rachel, the potatoes need mashing." And the moment passed. Another time, when I was 30, Natalie posted a series of photos on Instagram from what was clearly an expensive beach resort. Pristine white sand, turquoise water, a frozen drink in her hand with a little umbrella. The caption said, "Self-care is not selfish," with a heart emoji. I was sitting at my desk eating a sad salad I had brought from home because I was trying to save money, and I had sent her $1,200 just a month before because she had said her electricity was about to be shut off. I remember staring at those photos and feeling a hot flash of anger. But then I told myself maybe a friend paid for the trip, maybe she won a contest. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. I didn't ask. I never asked, because asking would mean admitting that something might be wrong, and I wasn't ready to face that. The clearest moment of all came when I was 33. I was on the phone with my mother, and she was explaining that Natalie needed help again. This time, it was something about a security deposit for a new apartment because her landlord was selling the building and she had to move. My mother said, "You know how hard it is for her, Rachel. She's not like you. She doesn't have your stability, your success. She's always been more fragile." And I said without thinking, "Mom, I've been helping Natalie for over a decade. When is she going to stand on her own?" There was a pause, a long, cold pause. And then my mother's voice changed. It got that brittle, wounded quality that I knew meant I had disappointed her. She said, "I can't believe you're being so selfish. After everything this family has done for you, you begrudge your own sister a little help?" She said, "If you don't want to be part of this family, Rachel, that's your choice. But don't expect us to pretend it doesn't hurt." I apologized. I sent the money. $2,000. And I never questioned out loud again. Looking back now, I can see so clearly what I couldn't see then: the pattern, the manipulation, the way every conversation was designed to make me feel guilty for having money and selfish for wanting to keep any of it. But when you're living inside that pattern, when it's been the rhythm of your entire adult life, it's almost impossible to see it for what it is. It just feels normal. It feels like love. I met my husband, David, when I was 32. He was a software engineer with kind eyes and a quiet laugh, and he saw me in a way that no one in my family ever had. He saw me as a person, not just as a source of support or a steady rock for everyone else to lean on. When he proposed after 2 years of dating, I said yes with my whole heart. But David also saw things that I had trained myself not to see. About 6 months into our marriage, he sat me down one evening with a serious expression. He had been going over our finances, trying to plan for our future, and he had noticed the pattern. He said, "Rachel, you've sent your sister over $30,000 in the past year." He said, "I know you love her, and I know family is important to you, but this isn't sustainable. This isn't healthy." I got defensive immediately. I said she needs help. She's struggling. My parents expect me to take care of her. And David looked at me with such sadness in his eyes. He said, "Your parents expect you to take care of her, but who's taking care of you?" He said, "When was the last time any of them asked how you were doing? When was the last time they offered to help you with anything?" I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. Because I couldn't think of a single instance. Not one. My parents never asked about my job, my stress, my health. They never offered to help with anything. Every conversation was about Natalie. Every phone call was a request. Every interaction was an opportunity for them to remind me of my obligation to the family. David didn't push. He never pushed. But he started gently encouraging me to pay attention, to notice, to keep track. So I did. I started keeping a spreadsheet. Every dollar I sent to Natalie, every request, every excuse. I tracked it all. And over the next 3 years, the numbers grew more and more horrifying. By the time Natalie died, I had sent her $287,000 over 11 years. That's not an exaggeration. That's not an estimate. That's the exact number from my spreadsheet, tracked to the penny. $287,000 that could have been a down payment on a house. That could have been a college fund for the children David and I wanted to have. That could have been our future, given away, a few thousand at a time, to support my supposedly struggling sister. And my parents? In all those years, they never sent Natalie a dime. not once. They just called me, guilted me, manipulated me, and watched as I emptied my bank account month after month. They lived in their beautiful house, drove their nice cars, took their annual cruises, and never once offered to help with the burden they had placed entirely on my shoulders. When Natalie died, I grieved. I grieved so hard. Despite everything, I loved my sister. I had memories of us as children, playing in the backyard, building blanket fort, staying up late whispering secrets. I remembered the time she made me a birthday card out of construction paper and glitter when she was 8, and I still had it in a box in my closet. I remembered the way she laughed, the way she called me Ray Ray, the way she always smelled like vanilla and coffee. I loved her, and losing her felt like losing a piece of myself. The funeral was in late October, 3 days before Halloween. The leaves were turning orange and red, and there was a chill in the air that seemed to seep into my bones. My parents were devastated, or at least they appeared to be. My mother sobbed through the entire service while my father sat stone-faced and silent. Family and friends came up to offer condolences, and I stood there in my black dress, accepting hugs and murmuring thank you over and over until the words lost all meaning. After the service, there was a gathering at my parents' house. Casseroles and sympathy cards and quiet conversations in corners. I was in the kitchen, refilling the coffee pot, when my mother found me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her makeup was smeared, and she grabbed my arm with a grip that was almost painful. She said, "Rachel, we need to talk about the finances. Natalie had some debts that need to be paid off, and we'll need you to handle them." She said probably another 15 or 20,000 just to get everything settled. I remember standing there with the coffee pot in my hand, staring at my mother's face, and something inside me went very still. My sister's body wasn't even cold yet. The funeral had ended less than 2 hours ago, and already my mother was asking me for money. I said, "Mom, this isn't the time." And she said, "When is the time, Rachel? These things don't wait." I said, "I'll think about it," and I walked away. I didn't send the money. For the first time in 11 years, I didn't send the money. I went home with David, and I cried for 3 days straight, and I didn't answer my mother's calls. When I finally did pick up, her voice was cold with disapproval. She said, "I'm very disappointed in you, Rachel." I said, "I know," and I hung up. The months that followed were a strange kind of limbo. I was grieving my sister while simultaneously feeling a confusing sense of relief that I didn't have to send money anymore. The guilt over that relief was overwhelming. What kind of person feels relieved that their sister is dead? I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Patricia Ling, who had kind eyes and a gentle way of asking questions that made me think about things I had spent my whole life avoiding. It was Dr. Ling who first suggested that my family dynamic might be what she called dysfunctional. She asked me to describe my childhood, my relationship with my parents, my role in the family. And as I talked, as the words spilled out week after week, I started to see the patterns I had been blind to for so long. The parentification, where I had been expected to take care of Natalie from a young age instead of being allowed to be a child myself. The financial exploitation, where I had been trained to feel responsible for my sister's well-being at the expense of my own, the emotional manipulation, the guilt trips, the way every conversation was designed to make me feel like I was never doing enough. It was painful. It was like having surgery without anesthesia, cutting out pieces of myself that I thought were essential but were actually just scar tissue. But it was also liberating. For the first time in my life, I started to understand that the way my family treated me wasn't love. It was use. And then, 3 weeks ago, Margaret Holloway from First Heritage Bank called. I drove to Portland the next morning. David offered to come with me, but I needed to do this alone. I needed to see whatever Natalie had left for me without anyone else there to filter my reaction. The bank was in a beautiful old building downtown, all marble floors and brass fixtures and hushed voices. Margaret Holloway was waiting for me in her office, a warm woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a sympathetic smile. She explained the situation carefully. My sister had opened this account 8 years ago, she said. She contributed to it regularly, usually between $3,000 and $5,000 a month. She never withdrew a single penny, and she left very specific instructions that I was to be contacted exactly 4 months after her death, no sooner. I asked her if there was any explanation, any letter, anything that told me why, and Margaret nodded. She said the safety deposit box contains documents and a personal letter addressed to you. We can go down there whenever you're ready. I wasn't ready, but I went anyway. The safety deposit box was larger than I expected, about the size of a shoebox. Margaret led me to a private room and left me alone with it. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the metal container like it might explode. Then I opened it. Inside there was a thick manila envelope and a smaller white envelope with my name written on it in Natalie's handwriting. That familiar, loopy script that I had seen on birthday cards and grocery lists and text messages for my entire life. My hands were trembling as I opened the white envelope first. The letter was dated 6 months before she died. Okay, I need to pause here for a second. Have you ever received something after someone died that completely changed how you saw them? Something that made you realize the person you thought you knew was actually hiding an entirely different life? Type your answer in the comments. And if this story is hitting close to home, please hit that like button so more people can find it. The letter was 5 pages long, written in Natalie's messy handwriting, with words crossed out and scribbled in the margins like she had been revising it over and over. I sat in that tiny room in the bank and read it 3 times, and each time I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. "Dear Ray Ray," she wrote, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone." And the 4 months have passed. I asked for 4 months because I needed Mom and Dad to have time to settle in, to get comfortable, to think everything was going according to their plan. I needed you to be far enough from the grief that you could think clearly. And I needed to make sure this letter got to you without them intercepting it. I don't know how to say what I'm about to say. I've tried to write this letter 100 times, and every version sounds like an excuse. But you deserve the truth, even if it makes you hate me, especially if it makes you hate me. I never needed your money, Rachel. Not once. Not a single time. The job at the coffee shop when I was 20, I actually got promoted to assistant manager 6 months later. I was making good money. The rent I couldn't pay? I could pay it. I just didn't because Mom told me you would, and I was young and stupid and thought that was just how things worked. The car repairs, the vet bills, the emergency expenses, all lies. Every single one. Mom would call me before she called you and tell me what to say if you asked. She had a whole system. She would come up with the crisis, coach me on the details, and then call you with the ask. And I went along with it for years because she made me believe you owed it to us. She said you were the one who got all the luck, all the brains, all the success. She said you didn't deserve it, that it should have been split evenly, that the least you could do was share. And I believed her. But here's what I didn't tell you. Here's what nobody told you. Mom and Dad aren't struggling. They never were. Dad's insurance agency is worth over $2 million. They have investments, rental properties, a vacation home in Arizona that they bought with cash 5 years ago. They're not rich, but they're comfortable. Really comfortable. More than comfortable enough to help their younger daughter if she actually needed it. They didn't help because they didn't want to. They wanted you to do it. They wanted to see how much they could extract from you, how long they could keep you on the hook. It became a game to them. Mom would come home from calling you and tell Dad how much you'd agreed to send, and they would laugh. They would actually laugh, Rachel, about how easy it was, about how you never questioned anything, about how they had raised you so well. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know, and because I finally realized how monstrous it was, and I couldn't keep being part of it. 3 years ago, I started secretly putting away money. Every dollar that you sent me, I deposited into this account. I couldn't figure out how to give it back to you without explaining everything, and I was too much of a coward to do that while I was alive. I was afraid you would hate me. I was afraid of what Mom would do if she found out. I was afraid of everything. But I'm dying now, and I guess that makes me brave enough to finally tell the truth. The manila envelope has more evidence. Bank statements from Mom and Dad's accounts that I managed to get copies of. Texts between me and Mom planning the requests. Records of their properties and investments. Everything you need to see the whole picture. I know you can't forgive me. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that in my own pathetic, too-late way, I loved you. You were the best sister anyone could have asked for, and I spent my whole life taking advantage of that. I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry. The money in this account is yours. It was always yours. Do whatever you want with it. Buy a house, take a trip, burn it if that feels right. It won't undo what we did to you. Nothing will. But maybe it can be a start. I love you, Ray Ray. I always did. Natalie, I sat in that bank room for over an hour. I read the letter again and again until the words blurred together. And then I opened the manila envelope. The evidence was overwhelming. Natalie had been thorough, almost obsessively so. There were printouts of text messages between her and our mother spanning years, with our mother detailing exactly what crisis to manufacture and how much money to ask for. There were bank statements from our parents' accounts showing balances that made my stomach turn. Over $300,000 in savings. Investment accounts with major brokerages. Property records for the Arizona vacation home they had never mentioned to me. Documentation of my father's business worth. And there was one document that hit me harder than all the others. It was a handwritten note, clearly written by my mother, that appeared to be a planning document. At the top, it said Rachel Extraction Plan. Below that was a list of monthly contributions, expected total take, and a running tally of how much they had gotten from me over the years. They had been tracking it. My own parents had been keeping score. I drove home in a daze. David knew something was wrong the moment I walked through the door. He took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms, and I sobbed against his chest for what felt like hours. When I could finally speak, I showed him everything. The letter, the documents, the evidence of a betrayal so calculated and so cruel that it felt like something out of a movie. David was furious. He paced our living room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair and muttering things like, "I knew it, and I always knew something was wrong with them." But he also held me. He told me it wasn't my fault. He reminded me that the people who were supposed to love me had instead chosen to use me, and that said everything about them and nothing about me. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls and decisions. I contacted a lawyer, a woman named Sandra Okonkwo, who came highly recommended and had experience with financial exploitation cases. I gave her everything. The spreadsheet I had kept of my payments to Natalie. The documents from the safety deposit box. The letter. All of it. She reviewed it with a grim expression and told me that while it might be difficult to pursue criminal charges given Natalie's death and my parents' likely claims that everything was a misunderstanding, I had a strong civil case if I wanted to pursue it. But more than legal action, I wanted answers. I wanted to look my parents in the eye and make them admit what they had done. I wanted them to know that I knew. And so when my mother called a week later to remind me about my father's 65th birthday party, I said yes. I told her I would be there. I marked the date on my calendar, December 14th, a Saturday evening, at my parents' house. The party was exactly the kind of event my parents loved to throw. Neighbors, business associates, extended family all gathered to celebrate my father's milestone birthday. When I arrived with David, the house was full of people I had known my entire life. Aunts and uncles who had always praised my parents for raising such good daughters. Family friends who had watched me grow up. The whole community there to witness what my mother had carefully curated as another perfect Donovan family event. My parents greeted us at the door with their usual practiced warmth. My mother was wearing an elegant red dress and pearls, her smile bright and lipsticked. My father looked distinguished in a sport coat, his silver hair neatly combed. If you didn't know better, they looked like the picture of devoted grandparents, pillar of the community types. I made small talk for the first hour. I complimented the appetizers, admired the decorations, accepted condolences about Natalie from people who approached me with sad eyes. I waited. I watched. And when the moment was right, when the room was full and the attention was high, I asked to say a few words. My mother looked surprised but pleased. "Of course," she said. What a nice gesture. I walked to the center of the living room, where everyone could see me. David stood near the back, his arms crossed, his face carefully neutral. And I began to speak. I said, "Thank you all for being here tonight. It means so much to my father, I'm sure, to be surrounded by so many people who care about him. And it means a lot to me to have this opportunity to share something important with everyone." My mother's smile was still in place, but I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Uncertainty. I said, as many of you know, my sister Natalie passed away 4 months ago. It was devastating for our whole family. Natalie was a beautiful person with a complicated life, and I loved her very much. Sympathetic murmurs from the crowd. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I said, "What you don't know is that recently I received some information from Natalie. She left me a letter and some documents that were only to be given to me after a waiting period. And what those documents revealed has completely changed my understanding of my family." The room got very quiet. My father had stopped pretending to be interested in his drink. My mother's tissue was frozen against her cheek. I said, "For the past 11 years, I have been sending money to Natalie. Thousands of dollars a month, usually for emergencies that my mother told me about. Car trouble, rent, medical bills, unexpected expenses. And I gave it willingly because I believed my sister was struggling and needed help." I paused, letting the words sink in. I said what I learned from Natalie's letter is that she never needed that money. Not once. Every emergency was manufactured. Every crisis was a lie. And it wasn't Natalie's idea. My mother stood up abruptly. "Rachel," she said in a warning tone, "this isn't the time or place." I said, "Actually, Mom, I think it's exactly the time and place. Because all these people here think they know who you are. They think you're a devoted mother and a pillar of the community. They should know the truth." I pulled out my phone, where I had saved screenshots of the text messages. I said, "I have texts between you and Natalie, Mom. Texts where you told her exactly what lie to tell me. Where you coached her on how to sound desperate, where you celebrated how much money you had extracted from me." Gasps from the crowd. My Aunt Clara's hand flew to her mouth. I said, "I have bank statements showing that you and Dad have over $300,000 in savings, investment accounts, a vacation home in Arizona that you never mentioned to me." You weren't struggling. You never were. You just wanted to see how much you could take from your own daughter. My father stood up now, his face red. "That's enough," he said. "You're embarrassing yourself." I said I'm embarrassing myself. I turned to face him directly. Over 11 years, I sent Natalie $287,000. $287,000 that you convinced me she needed, that you made me feel guilty for ever questioning. And you never contributed a single dime. Not once. Because you had trained me to be your personal ATM. My mother's face contorted. She switched tactics, her voice going high and pleading. "Rachel, sweetheart, you're confused. You're grieving. Natalie's death has clearly affected your judgment." I said, "I have the documents, Mom. I have the evidence." Natalie felt so guilty about what you made her do that she saved every penny I sent her and put it in a trust for me. She left me nearly $1 million along with proof of exactly what you did. That landed like a bomb. The room erupted in whispers. My cousin Marcus was staring at my mother like he had never seen her before. My father's business partner was backing slowly toward the door. My mother tried once more. "This is ridiculous. She's making things up. She's always been jealous of Natalie, always resented how close we were." And that's when Aunt Clara spoke. She was my father's sister, a woman in her 70s who had always been kind to me in a quiet way. She said, "Diane, that's enough." She said, "I've suspected something was wrong for years. The way you talked about Rachel, like she was just a source of income. The way you never seemed to want her around unless you needed something. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry, Rachel. I should have protected you." Other voices joined in. My Uncle Tom said, "I always thought it was strange how much money you seemed to have for vacations when you were always talking about how tight things were." My cousin's wife said Diane told me once that Rachel was too successful for her own good and needed to be kept humble. I thought it was a weird thing to say about your own daughter. The tide had turned. I could see it in the way people were looking at my parents, no longer with admiration, but with disgust. My mother's carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. My father made one last attempt. He put on his most reasonable voice and said, "Rachel, let's discuss this privately. There's obviously been some misunderstanding that we can clear up as a family." I said, "There's no misunderstanding. I have everything in writing, and I'm done being quiet about it." I turned to address the room. I'm sharing this because I spent my entire adult life being manipulated and exploited by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I believed I was helping my sister. I believed I was being a good daughter. And I was taken advantage of at every turn. If any of you have family members who treat you like an obligation instead of a person, who only call when they need something, who make you feel guilty for having success or boundaries, please know that you're not alone. And you don't have to keep giving pieces of yourself to people who will never appreciate it. There was a moment of silence, and then my Aunt Clara started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined in. My mother looked around wildly, unable to believe that her community, her friends, her carefully cultivated audience was turning against her. She grabbed her purse and said, "Frank, we're leaving." My father didn't argue. They walked out of their own party, past the guests who parted for them like a wave, and disappeared into the night. "All right, I want to check in with you again. Would you have confronted your parents publicly like I did, or would you have handled it privately? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And if you're dying to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed." The aftermath of the party was surreal. For the next hour, people came up to me one by one to offer their support. My Aunt Clara hugged me and apologized again for not speaking up sooner. My Uncle Tom said he had always felt like something was off with how my parents talked about me. My cousin Marcus told me that my mother had once tried to get him to invest in a fake business venture, and he had refused, but never told anyone because he didn't want to cause family drama. Story after story emerged, painting a picture of my parents that I had never fully seen before. They had manipulated so many people over the years, always careful, always calculated, always making sure they came out ahead. I wasn't the only victim. I was just the most consistent source of income. David drove us home that night while I sat in the passenger seat, exhausted but strangely peaceful. It was like a weight I hadn't known I was carrying had finally been lifted. The truth was out. I didn't have to pretend anymore. In the days that followed, my phone was flooded with messages. Extended family members reached out to express support. Old friends who had drifted away reconnected and said they had always felt like something was wrong but hadn't known how to help. And of course, my parents attempted to contact me multiple times. My mother's first text came 3 hours after they left the party. It said, "You have destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. My father tried calling the next morning. When I didn't answer, he left a voicemail that started out conciliatory and ended in anger. He said, "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us?" He said you were always too sensitive, always making things about yourself. He said, "Don't come crying to us when you realize what you've lost." I saved the voicemail. I added it to the evidence folder. A week later, my mother sent a long email attempting to explain and justify and gaslight all at once. She said Natalie's letter was obviously written while she was mentally unstable. She said the bank records had been misinterpreted. She said I had always had a tendency to exaggerate and dramatize. She said if I would just come home and talk, we could work this all out as a family. At the very end, almost as an afterthought, she said, "Besides, you owe us for raising you. We gave you a good life. The least you could do is show some gratitude." I forwarded the email to my lawyer. Sandra Okonkwo advised me on my options. I could pursue civil action for fraud and financial exploitation, but it would be lengthy and emotionally draining and might not result in any significant recovery, given my parents' likely legal defense. Or I could choose to walk away, to keep the money Natalie had left me, and to simply cut my parents out of my life forever. I thought about it for a long time. There was a part of me that wanted justice in the legal sense, wanted a judge to declare that what they did was wrong and force them to face consequences. But there was another part of me that was just tired. Tired of fighting, tired of proving, tired of spending any more of my energy on people who had never deserved it. In the end, I chose peace over revenge. I wrote my parents a letter. It was not long, but it said everything that needed to be said. I wrote, "Mom and Dad, I know what you did. I have the evidence, and so do the people who matter. I am not going to pursue legal action, not because I couldn't win, but because you are not worth any more of my time. I am done being your source of income. I am done being the reliable one you can always count on to bail you out. I am done accepting guilt and manipulation in place of love. I forgive Natalie because she tried, in the end, to make it right. She felt remorse. She wanted me to know the truth. That doesn't undo the years of lies, but it matters. I do not forgive you. You knew exactly what you were doing. You enjoyed it. You kept score. And you never once considered me a person worth caring about. This is goodbye. Do not contact me again. Do not come to my home. Do not try to reach me through other family members. If you attempt to contact me in any way, I will proceed with legal action. I am free now, and I intend to stay that way. Rachel." I sent the letter certified mail and then blocked both of their numbers. The months that followed were about rebuilding. David and I used part of the money Natalie had left to pay off our mortgage and put the rest into savings and investments for our future. We started trying to have a baby, something we had put off for years, because I had been so focused on taking care of everyone else that I had forgotten to take care of myself. I continued seeing Dr. Ling, working through the layers of trauma and learning to recognize the manipulation tactics I had been subjected to my whole life. It was hard work. There were days when I cried for hours, grieving not just Natalie, but the parents I had thought I had, the family I had believed in. And there were days when I felt genuinely happy, maybe for the first time in my adult life. Aunt Clara became a regular presence in my life. She would call just to check in, just to say hello, just to remind me that family isn't only about blood. She told me stories about my father as a young man, about the dysfunction in their childhood home that had shaped who he became. It didn't excuse anything, but it helped me understand that the cycle of harm had started long before I was born, and that by breaking free, I was also breaking that cycle for any children David and I might have. 6 months after the party, I received word through a cousin that my parents had sold their house. Apparently, the fallout from the public confrontation had been more severe than I realized. My father's business had suffered as former clients distanced themselves. My mother's volunteer organizations had quietly asked her to step back from leadership roles. The community that had once admired them now whispered about them, and my parents couldn't handle the loss of status. They moved to Arizona, to the vacation home that had been bought with money that should have been mine. I don't know if they're happy there or miserable or anything in between. I don't ask. I don't care. That part of my life is closed now. Last month, something happened that I never expected. I received a letter from my father. It was forwarded through Aunt Clara, who called to ask if I wanted her to throw it away. I told her to send it. I needed to see it, even if it hurt. The letter was 3 paragraphs. In the first, my father acknowledged that what they had done was wrong. Not completely, not in detail, but enough to show that some part of him understood. In the second, he tried to explain, to talk about fear and pride and the way things spiraled out of control. It wasn't an excuse, but it was an attempt at honesty that I had never seen from him before. In the third, he asked if there was any possibility of reconciliation. He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness, just for a chance to try again. I thought about it for a week. I talked to David. I talked to Dr. Ling. I sat with the letter on my nightstand and stared at it before I fell asleep each night. In the end, I wrote back. I said thank you for acknowledging what happened. It doesn't undo the damage, but it matters that you can see it. I said I'm not ready for reconciliation. I don't know if I ever will be, but I'm open to the possibility that someday, with time and demonstrated change, we might be able to have some kind of relationship. I said if you want to try, you can write to me occasionally. Don't ask for anything. Don't make excuses. Just share your life, and I'll share mine when I'm ready. I said this is not forgiveness. This is an open door. What you do with it is up to you. He wrote back a week later. Just a few lines about the weather in Arizona and a book he was reading. Normal things, human things. It's a start. Whether it leads anywhere, I don't know yet. My mother has not reached out. According to Aunt Clara, she refuses to admit she did anything wrong. She tells anyone who will listen that I was brainwashed, that Natalie's letter was fake, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. She will probably die believing that, and I have made peace with it. Some people cannot change. Some people will never see you as anything more than what you can provide for them. And the most powerful thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to prove them wrong and simply walk away. It's been 8 months now since I found out the truth. 8 months of healing, growing, learning to trust myself again. Last week, I found out that I'm pregnant. David and I are expecting our first child in the spring. A daughter, I've thought a lot about what I want to teach her, about family, about love, about boundaries. I want her to know that she is worthy of love simply because she exists, not because of what she can do for others. I want her to know that it's okay to say no, okay to protect herself, okay to walk away from people who hurt her, even if those people share her blood. I want her to know that family isn't just about genetics. It's about the people who show up for you, who care for you, who love you without conditions or scorecards. I think about Natalie sometimes, usually in the quiet moments before I fall asleep. I think about the sister I lost, the sister I never really knew, the sister who in the end found the courage to tell me the truth. I wonder what our relationship could have been if things had been different, if we had both broken free sooner, if we had been able to support each other instead of being pitted against each other by parents who saw us as resources to be exploited. I can't change the past, but I can honor Natalie's memory by living the life she wanted me to have. A life free from manipulation, a life full of genuine love, a life where I finally put myself first. The money sits in the bank, a constant reminder of everything that happened. Some days I resent it, other days I'm grateful for it. Mostly, I've made peace with it. It was taken from me under false pretenses, and now it's been returned. What I choose to do with it is up to me. And that freedom, that agency, that ability to make my own choices without guilt or obligation weighing me down, that's the real inheritance Natalie gave me. If you're listening to this and any of it sounds familiar, if you have family members who only call when they need something, if you've been made to feel responsible for everyone else's problems, if you've lost track of how much you've given away in the name of being a good daughter or son or sibling, I want you to know something. You are not a bank. You are not a safety net. You are not a source of income to be tapped whenever someone else has a crisis. You are a person with your own needs and dreams and limitations, and you deserve to be loved for who you are, not for what you can provide. It took me almost 4 decades and a letter from beyond the grave to learn that lesson. I hope it doesn't take you that long. I hope you can look at your relationships honestly and see the patterns for what they are. And I hope you can find the courage to set boundaries, to say no, to walk away from the people who will never see you as anything more than a resource. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're not a burden. You're a person who deserves love that doesn't come with a price tag attached. I know this now. Finally. And I'm not going back. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered something about a family member after they passed that completely changed how you saw them? Have you ever been financially exploited by people who were supposed to love you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And remember, it's never too late to break free. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to build the family you deserve, even if you have to build it from scratch. Until next time, take care of yourself first, because if you don't, no one else will.